and you can see the complete stream schedule with time. Along with that, we have with us the chief guest to inaugurate the stream. We have Naseeruddin Shah. I think we all know him, we all love him. We love his performances and we love him as a person that he is. Nasir Saab, welcome to the stream, and it is such an honor to host you this morning. So you have to unmute yourself, I think.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Ishan, for this warm welcome and greetings to all who are watching or listening. To use Ishan's phrase, nervous and excited, I do not know whether to admit to being excited or terribly nervous at the prospect of being a chief guest today, which is a job I normally abhor, and inaugurating this day-long webinar, which, among other things, also to be addressed by intellectual giants, committed sociologists, educationists, literateurs, august historians. So, as I said before, I don't know whether to feel excited or nervous, but I am certainly honored to be able to listen to all these worthies. I must admit, my knowledge of history is somewhat limited, as is my knowledge about the preservation of our heritage. I have certain naive ideas about both these things, but history is something that terrified me because numbers have always terrified me. I had the option of choosing history as a subsidiary subject in college, but I opted for political science instead, because the thought of memorizing all those dates of who ascended the throne when and who was deposed, etc., was like nightmarish. So I studied political science and I learned nothing. But I managed to get through the examination with a good second division by virtue of filling up pages and pages of my answer book with pure BS. That itself was perhaps I realized later, a very important lesson in politics. To be able to use as many words as possible and say nothing at all. So I do not claim, I'm not deluded enough to say anything wise or profound. And as I said, I have certain naive ideas which I would like to share. Because the fact is that at a time when we are being forced to witness the desecration of one of the lungs of New Delhi, it's nightmarish to watch the heart of New Delhi being mercilessly torn out, to be replaced by another, which will be of a hue more acceptable to the ruling dispensation. One cannot but dwell on this subject. The scant regard we have for our heritage was something that was brought home to me very early in life. I must have been about 10 years old. My brothers and I studied in Nainital in a boarding school, and every winter we'd come home for our vacations. We'd stop at Delhi before catching the train to Ajmer, where we lived, and would spend the day at an uncle's house. This uncle lived in Balli Maran, in Gali Qasim Jan, in fact. And in the Tonga on the way there, this dilapidated old Haveli filled with sacks of coal would be pointed out to us as the house of the great Mirza Ghalib. And I wondered, if Mirza Ghalib was such a great man, why can his memory not even be preserved properly? The way Shakespeare's is, his birthplace, Anne Hathaway's cottage, the Globe Theatre, his tomb, the church where he, etc., etc. Many years later, after visiting England, I was pretty aghast to discover that there's an entire city, Nottingham, thriving under the name of a fictional character. And one cannot escape thinking, why we, with all our centuries of history, with such an exciting, varied, incredible history, why can we not preserve it the way these people do? Then, of course, in Ajmer, where we lived, we traveled around Rajasthan, and everywhere we went, almost everywhere we went, very frequently, we saw once magnificent palaces, forts, havelis, lying in a state of abandonment and ruin, it did bother me. Then, of course, my parents moved to Missouri, and I was in college when they were there. And I was witness to the incredible event when the Prime Minister was supposed to fly over what is now Uttarakhand to survey the damage done by deforestation. And the hills were actually painted green to give the impression that the forests were still there. I've seen this with my own eyes, and that ghastly green paint stayed there for years. I wondered if they would next try to paint the sky a richer blue than it actually was. And I thought that these trees, these mountains, these lakes, these rivers, apart from all our fantastic literature, architecture, and all the other things that we have, which we actually have and which we can boast of, surely this nature is part of our heritage as well. And why can we not even look after it? Is this the price we have to pay for progress? It has always disturbed me, this thought about it. But these are just thoughts that have occurred to me. I really don't have an answer. And I'll be very happy to listen to the worthies who are going to speak through the day. Maybe they have answers to this subject. Also, on a personal level, having been part of the film industry for 45 years, it pains me greatly to report that the preservation of some of our timeless films, which should have been landmarks and which should have been part of our history, is not even being cared for. Would you believe that there is no existing print of the first film ever made in India? Raja Harishchandra, there is no existing print of the first talkie ever made in India, Alamara. And no one cares to take responsibility. And the state of the other films preserved in the archives is pretty shocking. And in fact, I get goose pimples thinking of the future of the records at the National Archives and the National Museum. What has been preserved is piffle. On a less important note, all over and connected to movies, you see all the magnificent old cinema houses disappearing until a day will come when there will be none left. Cinema going will perhaps cease to be a public, a communal activity. And for a Bombay resident, it will certainly strike a chord that the Irani cafes, which were an integral part of Bombay, which were like the signature of the city, are all gradually vanishing. I really don't have much more to say, and as I said, I'm keen to learn about this subject. So, as I said before, is it only nostalgia that makes us yearn for these things that have to give way to progress? And is this the price that one has to pay for progress? I don't have the answers. I'm hopeful and certain that the speakers who follow will. So on that note, I am very happy to declare this webinar open.
Thank you so much, Naseer Saab, for those words of wisdom. And as you said, much has been lost in terms of heritage, in terms of environment, and there's a need to preserve that. And only citizens united for the cause can do that. No government, no corporate houses can save those heritages.
Yes.
And
We all of us have to do it, and all of us have to somehow find ways. And as I've always believed that unless you can immediately affect those immediately around you, it's pointless talking of larger causes. So we should do what we can to look after the wet little kitten that comes to your doorstep, rather than talking of the vanishing wildlife. To water the little plants you have on your windowsill, rather than to worry about the disappearing rainforests of the Amazon. We should try and do whatever we can.
yeah, that's true. And